Om Sahanā-Vavatu, Sahanā Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavaditamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Humble Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai, for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Jai. Okay, we're going to continue with Swami Prabhavananda's introduction, and we're discussing the philosophy of Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta specifically, as espoused by Shankara. We'll come back to Maya for a little bit from our last discussion. The word's still here, so we can talk a little bit more about Maya. I'll read from Swamiji. He's talking about the superimposition, which is conceptually, it's possible to grasp it. We use the examples of snake in a rope and the mirage. And the mirage is also a common one. And the mirage is also a very good one, because here, you're walking along in the desert and you see water in the distance. And maybe there are some palm trees, but the consistent is you see water in the distance. And you may walk to it. And I remember the story being told with some real drama to it. And of course, I had walked across the desert. I walked for a few months. I never actually saw a mirage. But I know of people who have. Not that time. I had seen years before, where there seems water in the distance, and it looks certain that there's water in the distance. And if one is thirsty, they might walk towards the water, but the experience is that the water keeps moving away. And so we walk. And there's something in this mind that says it's still there, though. It's really there. It's very interesting that even though for a thirsty person, and this has happened, people who have walked in the desert and left the bodies before they got to that water. But there's something in the mind that actually will continue to assert, even though logically it couldn't be there because the water can't actually move like that. There's still something in the mind that's asserting, especially with thirst, especially when stress has come into the mind and body. There's something still asserting, but it's really there, and that's what I need. And this is what we deal with, by the way, is there are these multiple voices, as they were within our experience, and there is something asserting it's there, it's real, and that's involved in that superimposition. And so the question will be, what about that water? Does it have any existence? And on Friday, we were discussing this concept of existence, but non-existence. Neither. You can't say it exists because you'll never find that water. You'll never get to it. But you will always find something, and you know the answer. What will you always find? The sand. So it's not that the water is completely non-existent. It is that it appears to us because of the underlying reality of that desert scene, which is the sand, and some delusion, which only exists in the mind. So it's actually a good teaching mechanism to help us to see something. So there is an underlying reality. So you can't say that the world is completely non-existent. You can't say it's non-existent because there is an existence underlying it, in the same way that we would not want to say that the water has no existence whatsoever. And this is the word Maya, which is often translated as illusion. And when we hear illusion, we tend to think completely non-existent, but that's not what Maya is. It has an underlying existence. But the water per se is not existing. But water owes its existence or its appearance to something else in the same way that the snake owed its appearance. So superimposition is like this. It is the mind, as it were, superimposing some perceived reality upon some underlying reality. So in that way, when the teachers say, you can't say that the water is completely non-existent. You can't completely dismiss it because there's an effect that's occurring that is causing us to see water where there is not water. And that effect relies upon an underlying existence. So you can't say it's non-existent, but you also can't say that it exists. In other words, you can walk forever, but you won't find it. And in the same way, you can go after happiness in the world forever, but you'll never find it. Yeah? There's something in this mind also asserting that this world is the place where I will find the happiness, and it's in one of the things here. And of course, each of us in our own psyche, we have the idea that it'll be in the diamond, it'll be in the man or the woman, or this place. When I get to this place, it'll be here, or this job, or when I grow up, I'll be happy, like that. And so, delusion. So, here, Swamiji is speaking of this superimposition. And he goes here. He says, this statement needs some further explanation. Although Brahman, and again, picking up here, Brahman is the word. There's a lovely translation. When I was in India, Swami Ramaswarup shared this translation of the word Brahman, the infinite and ever expanding, which with the scientific mind I loved, because if we look at the universe, this is exactly what we see. When we look at it today, we see it is infinite. It has no bounds that can be perceived or understood, comprehended. But also it's expanding. And so that resonated. Although Brahman is never apparent to our everyday sense perception, and this is this question of superimposition, and Shankaracharya is saying, you see world, but there's only Brahman. Brahman Satyam. Jagat Mithya. So you see world, but there's only Brahman. And then Jivo Brahmeva Naparaha. And the I and the Brahman are non-different. Although Brahman is never apparent to our everyday sense perception, so when I look, be honest, my sight is limited. I say that I'm seeing, but of course I'm only really seeing what the eyes are presenting to me and what the mind interprets. Yeah? Really, I'm only seeing what the mind is presenting to me. I'm not seeing deeply in that way. I'm seeing something limited. Mind itself is limited. So Brahman is never apparent to our everyday sense perception. There is a manner in which we are aware of the reality, the inner self. Brahman, so I'll just say another way. He says that although to the five senses and our everyday life, we walk around this life and we say, I don't see Brahman or I don't see God. But the meaning of Brahman is not what we normally would consider any of the meanings for God. Peace Pilgrim got it right when she said it's the sum totality of everything and the underlier, and that from which it comes. So, but we walk around and we don't seem to see a unity, correct? But Brahman is described as a unity. So we're seeing with these five senses, or perceiving with them. However, he says, it's never apparent. There is a manner in which we are aware of the reality, the inner self. And so let's follow him and see if it's so. He says, Brahman, it has been said, is absolute existence, knowledge, and bliss. Only in transcendental consciousness can we know this fully. So only when we transcend this limited state can we know it fully. Yet Brahman is partly apparent to our normal consciousness also. Brahman is existence. And we all know that we exist. And this is something the mind hides. In this sense, every one of us has an intuitive knowledge of the inner self, the Atman or Brahman, within the creature, within me, within Hari, within everyone joining us this morning. We know that we exist. We don't question our existence, in fact. Is it so? Normally, we would never discuss our existence because our existence is presumed in every moment in waking state and dream state. It's presumed, it's assumed. We don't question it. And yet, the very fact that we exist owes the existence to existence itself. In other words, there had to be existence first before I could exist. And everyone here and everything here has the experience of existence. Also, the cats and dogs, they don't question it. The tree doesn't question it. The grain of sand doesn't question it. And yet, the existence is assumed. And we get into arguments and fights and wars and all of this craziness. Always with this I, me, mine. And yet, just underlying, just under the surface of this I, me, mine is existence itself. Does that resonate? Yeah, online? So it is amazing, if we can really catch it and reflect upon it, that the entirety of this has at its center existence, not non-existence. Non-existence, we're not having any of these discussions whatsoever. No universe, no ephemeral, no phantoms, no arguments, no fights. Even in deep sleep, somehow we come back to the dream state and then waking state. Even dying, quote unquote, the existence itself doesn't end. If we were to talk with someone who's had what we call a near-death experience, and so many books have been written in all of this. In fact, one of our dear friends in our circle, we came to the subject one day, and then he described his And he'd been in a horrible accident. His car had literally been run over by a semi-tractor trailer, literally run over. And 100 and some bones were broken. And he left the body on the operating table and was called. And he describes the experience quite vividly. And he would say, and then he was given a choice. But when he left the body, he also left the pain. If one might imagine having 100 and some bones broken and crushed, not just broken, but crushed. Some of them pulverized. Where today, steel rods are there because there's nothing left of the bone. The body is a miracle of modern science, that body. Because much of the structure of it has been reconstructed, rebuilt. The lung was pierced, the kidney was pierced. All of this just incredible. And the pain as he lay there after the accident, the pain excruciating, one could only imagine. And then he left the body and he got a complete release from the pain. And then he was given the choice to continue, which obviously he said yes. And of course, the moment he said it, he was back in the body and all the pain was back. And quite an experience, huh? And yet, he would say at no point ever did he not exist. And so, this is what Swami's pointing to, what Swamiji is pointing to, is this existence itself is not an individual affair. Huh? And so we do have direct experience with Brahman. Does that make sense? And this is the point he's making. And it's not just inferred, it's real experience. For us to exist, existence itself has to exist first. So he goes on. He says, Brahman is existence, and we all know that we exist. In this sense, every one of us has an intuitive knowledge of the inner self, the Atman, or Brahman within the creature. The inner self, the reality, is never an object of sense perception, however, because in our ignorance, we superimpose the idea of private individuality. And this is really, he's talking really where the superimposition begins, which is this superimposition of a private reality, of individuality. And so from the very beginning, we experience what seems to be, I am this. And aren't connecting to the existence itself, which of course, the existence itself is our real father, mother. Because we start with existence. Everything starts with existence, yeah? Because in our ignorance, we superimpose the idea of a private individuality, of being Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones, upon our awareness of existence. And we are aware of existence, yeah. We're unable to understand that existence is not our private property, that it is universal and absolute. And that's the point we make here. The inner self is therefore present in our normal consciousness as the object of the ego idea, a literal translation of Shankara's phrase. The superimposition of the ego idea upon existence is our first and most important act as human beings. The human being doesn't exist as a human being per se without first the superimposition of the ego idea. Without existence itself having been covered. It's not individuated. It can't be individuated. Existence itself always remains undivided, unindividuated. The moment we have made this central act of superimposition, the moment we have said, I am private, I'm separate, I'm an individual, we have set up a kind of chain reaction which makes further superimposition inevitable. The claim to individuality for ourselves implies individuality everywhere. It automatically superimposes a multiple world of creatures and objects upon the one undivided reality, the existence which is Brahman. Ego idea and world appearance depend upon each other. Lose the ego idea in transcendental consciousness, and the world appearance must necessarily vanish. And so when you practice meditation, you close your eyes. But still there are four senses that you've not shut. Yeah? But you transcend them, you go beyond them. Is it so?
That's right.
Yeah. And when you transcend them and go beyond them, do you also transcend the ego idea?
Mm-hmm.
And is there any experience of separation then?
No.
No. Is there any idea of separation then?
Then it's not, yes.
But are you aware?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You're not sleeping.
No.
Okay. So you see the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we come back to this, and Hari's a great example, because each of us have the experience of meditation, this state that we'll discuss. Many of us have the experience eyes open, and yet the mind becomes single-pointed on whatever is our activity. It might be reading or writing or sports. It might be playing football or badminton or anything, ping pong. I used to play ping pong, and I would experience the meditative state in playing ping pong. Everything, the separation of things would fall away. And I was simply in the flow with this ball, and everything, the mind was completely focused on the ball and watching the ball as it moved. And the hand and everything else would seem to move naturally, just a part of some dance. Eyes open, but still no separation. And so each of us have the experience. We will ask Hari, because Hari is able to testify to a developed meditation practice where one reaches the state of meditation through the seated practice that we call meditation. And you can confirm then that this sense of separation, this ego sense, which is really the beginning of the superimposition, it is the Maya in play when it arises, and I take myself to then be separate. But the deeper reality you're aware of, which is unindividuated, which is a unity. So the reality is unaffected. The reality doesn't change. It appears to change. And the appearance of change is through superimposition. Upon the I, the real I, which isn't even concerned about whether it is an I or not, but is simply in the state of existence, but very much aware. Yeah, the I itself then becomes subject to an object arising, and the object arising is this ego sense, and it is also the world. In other words, no feeling of separation, no world. No feeling of separation, then we live life. As Swami Prabhavananda had said, it's not that from a practical standpoint that what we call a chair doesn't still appear. It's not that you can't sit. But when the feeling of separation is gone, when the ego sense has been transcended, then there is no separation. Everything is an aspect of the whole. And that's not just a logical statement at that point. There's nothing to deny it any longer. And so superimposition is Maya. Maya is superimposition. But then there are the additional effects within Maya that are arising from the superimposition, from that original superimposition, which is the feeling of I-ness. And from that, everything comes. Everything what? Everything in terms of suffering. Not the things themselves, but the idea of the things is arising from that. And then the idea of the need of a thing, the desire for a thing, or the non-desire for some other thing, or the aversion to it. So he says all of it's coming from that. But in fact, is there a world? No, not per se. Is there an underlying existence? Of course, there's an underlying existence under all of this, under each and every I am, is the same underlying existence. And that is Brahman, that is the Absolute. Is there some existence apart from it? No. Does there need to be? And could there be? No. There's just one existence. And it's not like there needs to be some other existence. All of that would have to be superimposed upon it. So we have direct experience, Hari. Does that resonate?
Yeah.
We have direct experience. Yeah. And if we catch that, that's a miracle. If we catch that, if we really catch, it's true, I do exist, and this existence itself is the Absolute. For me to exist as an apparent individual, existence has to come first. Which means I am of that existence. Which ultimately means Aham Brahmasmi, I am that existence. And when you know this, these things like fear and anger and judgment and greed and lust and all of these, they still appear. But they have the potential to be set aside. In the same way that the child sets aside the toys of childhood. It's not that we need them anymore, because we are what we sought. So tomorrow morning there's a beautiful discussion here about Brahman and Ishvara, which we'll pick up. And I've extended a couple more days. We're in this transition process as we've shared. And we'll continue this through the morning of the 23rd. Hari's checking to see if you have any comments or questions.
question, Prakriti is Brahman manifest. Does that mean Maya is a product of the mind in the mind?
Prakriti is Brahman manifest. We can say Prakriti is Maya. It's not different. In other words, what we've just been discussing is that Maya is an aspect of Maya, is the superimposition of what appears to be upon what is, in the same way that the water in the desert is a superimposition upon the sand, which is what is. In the same way, Prakriti Maya is a superimposition upon the absolute. And these three words that you've just used, mind, Maya, and Prakriti, they're synonyms. They mean the same. They are the same. Mind is Maya. Maya is mind. And so too, Prakriti is mind, universal mind, universal mind. Don't try to say my mind, because my mind also is illusory. That's that same I-ness and mindness. And thank God it's universal mind. I mean, really, because that means that when we're in a state of suffering, we're only suffering because of the particular thoughts that we've drawn to us and that we've identified with. But it's possible to change them, meaning we can choose or tune to other thoughts, other desires, other identities. And when we come to Ishwar, there's a comment that Swamiji makes related to identity, which is interesting. So really they're the same. And again, we're not negating. I would say from this perspective, we're affirming. The only difference between the saints and us, the saint, the one who's realized the reality, lives in it, none of these went to caves. And by the way, the difference is that they're free of these limited states, limited ideas, limited experience, anger, greed, lust, hatred, judgment, suffering, free of, and positively joyous, generally speaking. And nobody's running to get away from the apparent world. We try to run away from it when we're caught up in the suffering, because we think that something here is causing me to suffer, but it's not something here, it's something here that's causing me to suffer. And so we fix this and the suffering ends. We don't have to go somewhere because we are where we've always been. There's nothing to run away from. I'm Brahman now. I'm with Brahman so more. We continue. I said through the 23rd, so we've got a couple more weeks. A little more. Okay. Thank you for the question. Who asked the question? Did you remember?
James.
James.
Yeah.
Is that Hara?
I'm not sure, maybe.
Okay. Oh. Okay, we'll close. Final prayers in Arati. Page 156. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyam Amritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mrityor Mokshiyam Amritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mrityor Mokshiyam Amritat Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Shantu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashanto Makashi Dukhabhave Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mritor Ma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudashate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And universal prayer. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember thee. Let us ever sing thy glories. Let thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in thee forever and ever. And below Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai, for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Jai.